My name is Joe Salina. I work with BabyCastles. I joined up with them about a little over 2 years ago now. And basically what we do is we present independent video games in social contexts. So things like museums, art shows, concerts, things like that. Things where people are convening to interact with each other and also interact with what's going on around them. Our attitude is, people go to see music together, people go to look at art together. We feel that games are also a medium and a creative expression, so it makes a lot of sense for people to interact with those also in a social setting. The Maze event is something that happened in Brooklyn 3 years ago initially. The whole concept is building a physical maze inside of one of these independent art spaces that people have to navigate through. Meanwhile, there's performances of music happening, there's different art installations going on. So we were invited to install some of the indie games that we work with. So the whole idea was, okay, this maze has dead ends, let's put the games and treasure chests in there. So what we're doing is we're building treasure chests that when you open them up, there's going to be a game inside, surrounded kind of by what we're going to make look like treasure. So people will stumble upon them, they can play them, they could just look at them, but they become part of the maze and part of the aesthetic of like what's happening here in this, basically this entire environment that they're building here, where you're going to just be having all these different types of work occurring at the same time, and you can kind of process it as you want it. The theme of a lot of this stuff is just getting people to realize that they have the ability to make the things that they want. It's not up to you to just have to necessarily consume everything. If you feel like, there's something out there that's missing, you can go ahead and actually try and figure out how to make that yourself. I think you're seeing new demographics get into games, and I think it's because people are understanding why people play games more. It's not, years and years and years ago, it was like, how do we get more girls to play games? So they would try to make a Barbie game where you ride horses, and the game itself would be terrible, and it's not really fun. The thing that actually makes it a game enjoyable is the gameplay, and I think that they're beginning to realize that maybe boys and girls don't play games differently, maybe they do, but it's not because one has guns and one has ponies. It's about some kind of inherent gameplay system that exists within the game, and if it's fun, you're going to appeal to different people for different reasons. So maybe what attracts older people to games is different than what attracts a 13-year-old boy to games, and you just have to understand how that works. It's not necessarily about just the actual polish or the aesthetic, it's about what is intriguing to an individual or a demographic about playing games. And I think that people are understanding that more, and we're seeing a broader range of games kind of taking over in different ways. A really interesting thought that got me thinking about this years ago was William Gibson, the author, had a book coming out a couple years ago, I guess. And I was listening to him on NPR, and he was talking about how his idea of the future when he wrote Neuromancer isn't really what we're at, and he doesn't really think it's where it's going anymore. But he thinks really what the future is going to be about is that he's like, this generation of kids, they're not going to know really, they're not going to see a difference between an MP3 and a record. They see both of these things as actual objects. Even if there's no physicality to it, it still exists. Whereas I think like our generation and the ones above it tend to be more, we still see something as digital as being not actually real. And I think that's something that's going to change. Another friend of mine, a game designer, this guy is Zach Gage, he made kind of this conceptual piece called Lose-Lose, which was essentially a game like Space Invaders. So you're a little ship and you're shooting aliens coming down to you. But every alien is a file on your computer, and when you shoot it, it deletes the file on your computer. So the only way to win is by losing. Because if you're playing it, you're deleting files on your computer, and it targets your most important files, like your documents and your photographs and your music and other things like that. And it got to the point where Norton actually labeled it as a virus, so it would delete it on your computer if it found it. And he said his intention wasn't to just like screw with people's computers and ruin their lives. What he was trying to do is show us that, if you get married, you have your wedding photos, you keep them somewhere safe, like in a chest or something, or in a box in the attic. All your files on your computer, they're just sitting there, and very few people do anything to really secure those. And in an instant, all these things which are your life now can just kind of vanish. We're still kind of just starting to realize that digital is just as important as reality. And I don't know that it's necessarily something that like I'm totally in love with and comfortable with, but that's just what it is, and we just have to kind of roll with that, unless you want to like move to the forest somewhere. You know, if you want to be an active participant in society, you're going to have to take on some of these digital responsibilities.